and the morning was heavy with mist, the kind that hung low between the trees and made every step feel like entering into something unknown. The air was damp, carrying the faint smell of wet soil and moss. Birds called from somewhere high above, though the thick canopy kept them hidden. The forest was alive, yet strangely quiet, as if it was waiting. The boy walked slowly, his backpack resting firmly against his shoulders. It wasn't packed with much, just the essentials: a water bottle, a few pieces of bread, a flashlight, and a small knife his grandfather had once given him. His shoes crunched softly on the leaves scattered along the trail, though he couldn't tell if this was really a trail or just the beginning of one. He had followed no signs, no markers. He had simply kept walking until the trees grew taller, the light grew dimmer, and the noise of the world outside faded completely. He stopped and looked around. Every direction looked the same: rows of tall trunks, green leaves, and the occasional stretch of tangled vines. There was no sound of traffic, no hint of human voices, no smoke from chimneys. Only him and the vast stretch of wilderness that seemed endless. He breathed in slowly, trying to steady himself. It was the first time he had ever gone this deep into the woods alone. His footsteps felt louder than before, echoing in his ears, though no one else seemed to be listening. Occasionally, a twig snapped beneath his shoes, and the sharp crack startled him more than he wanted to admit. He tried to convince himself he was ready for this, ready to prove that he could make it on his own, at least for a while. But the forest didn't care about bravery. It simply existed with its own rules, its own silence, and its own secrets. As he moved further in, the light shifted. The mist thinned for a while, letting in thin rays of sunlight that painted golden stripes on the ground. He paused to touch the rough bark of a tree, grounding himself in its presence. The texture was hard and uneven, covered in patches of moss. He thought about how long this tree had been standing here, perhaps hundreds of years, watching everything and everyone who had ever passed by. He wondered if anyone before him had stood in this exact spot, feeling the same way, small, uncertain, but strangely connected to something greater. The hours stretched on. He walked without checking the time, his sense of direction blurring with every turn. He stopped once near a fallen log to take a sip of water. The liquid was cool, soothing, but the silence around him remained heavy. He sat on the log, listening. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled. It wasn't loud, just a faint murmur, but enough to catch his attention. Streams always meant something: life, direction, safety. He stood and followed the sound. The terrain grew uneven as he moved. Roots reached out from the ground, twisting like fingers trying to trip him. He stumbled once, catching himself against a branch. The sound of water grew louder. Soon, he saw it, a narrow stream winding its way through the undergrowth. The surface reflected pieces of sky, broken by leaves floating gently on the current. He crouched beside it, dipping his fingers into the cool flow. For a brief moment, he smiled. The forest didn't feel so intimidating here. The sound of moving water was comforting, almost like a voice reminding him he wasn't completely alone. But then the forest reminded him again that it was not a place of comfort. A sudden rustle came from the opposite bank, sharp and unexpected. He froze, his hand still hovering above the stream. His eyes darted across the trees, searching for movement. Something shifted in the undergrowth, too big to be a bird, too deliberate to be the wind. His heart hammered in his chest. He held still, barely breathing, until the sound stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again to silent. Then, slowly, the forest returned to its rhythm. A bird chirped, leaves rustled in the breeze. Whatever had been there was gone, or perhaps still watching, hidden. He swallowed hard and stood up, gripping the strap of his backpack tighter. He decided to keep moving, following the stream upstream. The water's path seemed easier to trust than wandering aimlessly. It led him deeper, through denser parts of the forest where the light struggled to reach the ground. Ferns brushed against his legs, and spiderwebs stretched unseen until they clung to his skin. He wiped them off, his nerves already fraying taut as the day wore on. Hunger began to creep in. He pulled out a piece of bread from his pack and chewed slowly while walking. Each bite was dry, but it kept him going. The forest seemed endless. But he reminded himself he had chosen this to step into something vast and unknown. He had wanted to test himself, to see how long he could endure. But already, a part of him questioned if he had been foolish. The sound of the stream grew louder again, but this time it wasn't a gentle trickle. Soon, he found himself standing before a small waterfall, the water cascading down rocks into a pool below. The sight was unexpectedly beautiful. Mist rose from the falling water, catching the sunlight and breaking into tiny rainbows. He stood there for a long while, captivated. But beauty didn't erase the unease. Every now and then, he felt the weight of the forest pressing in, as if unseen eyes lingered in the shadows. He shook off the thought and crouched near the pool, splashing his face. The cold water jolted him awake, reminding him he still had a long way to go before nightfall. He moved on again, climbing carefully along the rocks beside the waterfall. His legs burned with effort, but he pushed forward. At the top, the forest stretched wider than before. Trees packed so closely that the space between them looked like walls. He felt small again, swallowed by the immensity of it all. Time slipped away without notice. The sun was lower now, casting long beams of light through the trees. Shadows grew longer, darker, stretching like fingers across the ground. He quickened his pace, suddenly aware of how dangerous it could be to remain in the open when night arrived. He had no tent, no fire, nothing but himself. He searched for a place, a small clearing, a space against the rocks, anywhere that felt safe enough to pause. His body ached, but the forest gave him no rest. Every time he thought he found a spot, something about it felt wrong. Too open, too dark, too close to water. He kept moving, the tension rising in his chest. Then, as if the forest decided to offer him something, he found a hollow beneath the roots of an enormous tree. The space was not large, but enough for him to crawl into. It felt sheltered, hidden, as if the tree itself had been waiting to offer protection. He slipped inside, adjusting his backpack as he settled. The earth smelled damp, but it was better than the open. Sitting there, listening to the fading sounds of the forest, he let out a long breath. His hands trembled slightly as he held the flashlight, though he didn't turn it on yet. He didn't want to call attention to himself. The night would come soon, and with it, the unknown. He pulled his knees to his chest, staring out at the darkening forest. Somewhere in the distance, A low call echoed long, haunting, and unfamiliar. The boy shut his eyes for a moment, gripping the knife in his hand. He told himself he wasn't afraid, though every part of him was alert. The forest was alive, and he was only beginning to understand what that truly meant. Night came slowly, not like the city where lights snapped on and darkness seemed less intimidating. Here, in the vast wilderness, night was something that swallowed everything whole. The last rays of sunlight faded behind the tall canopy, leaving only the dim shapes of trees standing like endless towers. Shadows stretched longer until they finally merged into one another, and the boy, sitting in the hollow beneath the giant tree, felt the weight of the forest pressing down on him. At first, the silence seemed endless, but soon, sounds emerged different from the ones he had heard during the day. The forest had its own language for night. Crickets chirped in a steady rhythm, frogs croaked near the stream he had followed, and occasionally, something moved through the undergrowth with a soft rustle. Every sound felt magnified in the darkness, each one tugging at his nerves. He clutched the small knife tighter, holding it against his chest. His flashlight rested by his side, though he still hesitated to use it. The thought of shining light into the woods made him uneasy, as if the darkness might take offense, or worse, reveal something waiting just beyond his sight. His breath was slow, but his heart pounded heavily. The minutes turned into hours, and though he tried to rest, sleep refused to come. His body ached from the long walk, but his mind remained restless. Every crack of a twig, every distant cry, every faint movement of leaves made him flinch. Once, he thought he heard footsteps slow, deliberate, too heavy to be an animal. He froze, straining his ears. The sound continued for a few moments, then vanished, leaving only silence behind. He whispered to himself, "It's nothing, just the forest." But the words felt weak. He pressed his back against the roots, making himself smaller, hoping that whatever moved outside would simply pass by. When the moon finally rose, its pale light managed to break through gaps in the canopy, painting faint silver streaks across the forest floor. From his hollow, he could see pieces of the sky, stars scattered in patterns he didn't recognize. For a moment, the fear eased. The forest seemed less endless under the gaze of the moon, as if the sky had remembered him. He leaned his head against the roots, letting the faint glow steady him. But peace was fleeting. A new sound came low, drawn out, like a howl. It rose from the distance, deep and haunting, vibrating through the still air. He stiffened immediately, the knife trembling slightly in his grip. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far enough to ignore either. The forest quieted for a moment after the sound, as if even the smaller creatures listened carefully. Then the night returned to its rhythm. The boy sat frozen, his throat dry. Wolves, coyotes, he didn't know. He had read about animals in the wild, about how most of them avoided humans. But that knowledge felt small and fragile here. He tucked his knees tighter, trying to convince himself that the hollow of the tree was safe, that the forest would leave him alone. Eventually, exhaustion overtook him. His eyes grew heavy, and despite his fear, he drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. Dreams came quickly, strange, vivid dreams of walking through the forest endlessly, never finding a way out. Trees twisted into shapes of faces, shadows reached for him, and whispers followed wherever he stepped. He woke with a gasp, sweat beading on his forehead. Though the night was cold, the moon had shifted higher, casting new shapes across the ground. His throat ached with thirst, and he wished he had saved more water. Carefully, he crawled out of the hollow, holding his flashlight, but still keeping it off. The stream wasn't far. He listened closely before moving, every step deliberate, every sound magnified. When he reached the water, the faint shimmer of moonlight made it glow. He crouched, scooping handfuls into his mouth. The water was cold, sharp against his dry throat. He splashed some on his face, shivering at the chill. For a brief moment, it was relief. Then came another sound, not far. Something moved, branches bending, leaves crunching under weight. He froze, water dripping from his chin. Slowly, he turned his head. Beyond the stream, shadows shifted, darker than the rest. He couldn't see what it was, only that it was there, watching. His hand shook as he reached for the flashlight. He clicked it on, the beam cutting across the darkness. The light swept over trees, rocks, vines, but nothing else. The shadows were gone, or perhaps hiding just beyond where the light could reach. His chest heaved. He turned the flashlight off quickly, not wanting to reveal himself longer than necessary. He hurried back to the hollow, crawling inside and pulling his backpack close. The fear burned through his exhaustion now, keeping him wide awake. He clutched the knife again, his knuckles white. The hours crawled slowly. At times he thought he heard whispers, not words, but movements that almost sounded human. Other times, the silence pressed so heavily that even his own breathing seemed too loud. When dawn finally came, it was not sudden. The sky brightened gradually, shadows retreating as faint light touched the forest. Birds began to stir again, their calls breaking the heavy silence. Relief washed through him, though his body was stiff and tired. He had survived the first night. Climbing out of the hollow, he stretched his sore muscles. The forest looked different in the morning, less threatening, almost calm. But he knew better now. The forest had shown him its face at night, and he wouldn't forget it. He ate the last piece of bread from his pack, chewing slowly as he considered his next move. The stream seemed the safest guide, but he didn't know where it led. Still, it was better than wandering blindly. He filled his bottle with water, hoping it would last him long enough to find something useful. As he walked, he paid more attention than before. He noticed how the light shifted through the leaves, how some plants clustered near water, how animal tracks marked the ground in certain places. The forest wasn't just endless chaos, it had patterns, rhythms. If he could learn them, maybe he could last longer. The day stretched endlessly. He followed the stream for hours, sometimes losing sight of it, but always finding it again by listening carefully. His stomach growled, hunger gnawing at him. He searched for berries, mushrooms, anything edible, but he hesitated to eat what he couldn't recognize. The knife in his hand felt small against the vastness of survival. At one point, he found a broken branch on the ground, stripped of leaves and smooth enough to serve as a walking stick. He picked it up, feeling stronger with something in his other hand. The rhythm of walking returned, though the forest remained endless. By midday, the sun broke through more fully, lighting the trees in golden hues. He came across another clearing where wildflowers grew, their colors vibrant against the green. For the first time, he allowed himself to sit without fear. The beauty was overwhelming, almost enough to erase the memory of the night. But the forest didn't let him forget for long. A sudden movement in the distance caught his eye, something large, moving through the trees. His breath caught. This time, he didn't wait to see what it was. He picked up his pace, moving quickly along the stream, his heart hammering again. The footsteps behind him seemed to follow, not close enough to see, but close enough to feel. He didn't stop until the sound faded. Even then, he kept moving, too afraid to pause. The forest seemed alive, always watching, always testing him. And though he tried to stay strong, he couldn't escape the truth. He was alone here, and the forest had only just begun revealing itself. The day wore on, hunger and exhaustion weighing heavier with every step. The boy realized that if he was to survive longer, he would need more than courage. He would need to learn the language of the forest, to understand its silence, its warnings, its offerings. The thought both terrified and intrigued him. As the sun dipped lower again, he searched desperately for a safe place before night returned. The memory of the hollow tree felt distant now, and he doubted he would find something as safe again. He scanned every shadow, every root, every rock, hoping for a refuge. And then he saw it, an opening in the side of a small cliff, half hidden by vines. A cave, dark, narrow, but sheltered. He approached carefully, shining his flashlight into the entrance. The beam revealed only stone walls and shadows. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. He stepped inside, the cool air wrapping around him. He set down his pack and sat against the wall, listening to the forest outside. His heart finally slowed. Though unease lingered, he knew night would come again, and with it, more sounds, more shadows, more tests. But for now, in the dim shelter of the cave, he let himself breathe. The forest hadn't defeated him yet. The cave was damp and cool, its walls rough with jagged stone. The boy sat with his back pressed against the rock, his legs drawn close as if the walls themselves could protect him from what lurked outside. He could hear the faint sound of dripping water somewhere deeper inside, a steady rhythm echoing like a heartbeat. At first, the sound was comforting, but the longer he listened, the more it felt like a reminder that the cave stretched into darkness, beyond what his flashlight could reveal. He turned the beam slowly along the walls, tracing the uneven surfaces. Moss clung to the stone in patches, and faint cracks ran like veins across the surface. The cave wasn't large, not at the entrance at least, but it narrowed and curved into shadow. The light caught something glistening farther in, but he couldn't see what. His grip tightened on the knife. He decided not to explore. Not yet. Outside, the forest hummed with its late-day song. The air carried the voices of birds settling in for the evening, insects rising in a steady chorus, and the distant movement of unseen creatures. The sun was slipping lower, its glow filtering through the vines that hung across the cave entrance. The light shifted from gold to orange to a deepening blue. The boy sat still, knowing that soon night would come again. He thought of the hollow tree he had hidden in before, and how exposed he had felt. Every sound magnified until it crushed him. The cave felt safer, at least for now. It gave him stone walls instead of roots, shadows instead of open sky. But it also gave him a new fear. What if something else already called this cave home? As the last of the sunlight faded, he forced himself to eat. His supplies were dwindling. A single piece of bread remained, and even that he broke in half, saving the rest for tomorrow. The dry crumbs stuck to his throat, and he chased them with water from the stream. His stomach still ached with hunger, but it was all he had. The night fell quickly, darker than the one before. He turned off the flashlight to conserve its power, and the cave plunged into shadow. Only faint light from the moon slipped through the vines at the entrance, casting pale lines across the ground. He pulled his backpack closer, clutching it as if it could shield him. Then the sounds began again. At first, the familiar rhythm of crickets and frogs returned, but soon came something else. A soft rustle outside, followed by a low growl that rolled like thunder. His chest tightened. He froze, straining his ears. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by the sound of heavy steps. Something was moving in the forest, something big. The boy held his breath, pressing deeper into the cave. His fingers trembled against the knife handle. The footsteps grew louder, crunching leaves and snapping twigs. The growl turned into a snarl, sharp and guttural. It stopped just outside the cave. He could hear the creatures breathing now, deep, heavy, like a bellows drawing air. His heart pounded so loudly he feared it would give him away. He shut his eyes, wishing himself invisible. A shadow crossed the entrance, blotting out the moonlight. The boy clamped his hand over his mouth, holding back a gasp. The shape was massive, larger than any dog he had ever seen, with shoulders that brushed against the vines as it moved. Its outline was only visible for seconds before it passed, but the memory burned into him. The sound of its breathing lingered, echoing faintly as the steps receded. The forest outside grew quiet again, as if holding its own breath. Minutes stretched endlessly. The boy didn't move. His muscles ached from the tension, but he dared not shift. Finally, when he was certain the creature had gone, he exhaled shakily, his chest burning. But sleep did not come. Every sound kept him awake: the faint rustle of leaves, the cry of an owl, the drip of water inside the cave. He sat with his back against the stone, staring into the darkness, his knife clutched tightly. Time blurred. The night was endless. He slipped in and out of shallow sleep, waking at every sound, heart racing each time. At one point, he dreamed of walking again, of endless trees closing in, branches reaching like arms. He woke with a start, sweat on his forehead, though the air was cold. Finally, dawn broke again. Pale light seeped through the vines, washing the cave in faint silver. The boy sat stiffly, exhaustion heavy in his body. His eyes burned with lack of sleep, but relief came with the morning. He had survived another night. Emerging from the cave, the forest seemed different once more. The morning light painted the leaves in soft green, dew clinging like diamonds. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of damp soil. For a moment, the beauty almost erased the fear. But hunger reminded him. His stomach twisted painfully, and the last piece of bread in his pack felt too small. He ate it slowly, chewing each bite as though it mattered more than anything. Then he drank deeply from the bottle, though he knew it wouldn't last forever. He knew he couldn't stay here. The cave had given him safety, but not food. If he didn't find something soon, hunger would break him before the forest did. He set out again, following the stream further upstream. The water gurgled over rocks, leading him deeper into the wilderness. His walking stick tapped against the ground as he moved, helping him over uneven roots. Birds flitted above, their calls echoing through the canopy. Hours passed. His legs burned, but he pressed forward, searching desperately for anything edible. He scanned bushes, trees, the ground, hoping for berries, nuts, anything. Twice he thought he found something, but fear of poison stopped him. He had heard too many warnings: eat the wrong thing, and the forest would end you quickly. The sun climbed higher, and the heat pressed down. Sweat clung to his skin, mixing with dirt. His throat ached again. He stopped to refill his bottle at the stream, kneeling in the mud. As he bent down, movement caught his eye: fish darting beneath the surface, small but alive. Hope sparked. He gripped the knife, watching the fish swirl. They were fast, but they were food. He tried, plunging his hand into the water, but they slipped away easily. Again and again he tried, his frustration growing. Finally, after what felt like forever, he managed to corner one against a rock. Stabbing quickly with the knife, the blade struck, and the water thrashed with silver scales. His breath caught. When he pulled it out, a small fish wriggled weakly on the blade. His hands shook, but triumph filled him. Food. Real food. He cleaned the fish clumsily, washing it in the stream. He had no fire, no way to cook it, but hunger silenced his hesitation. He ate it raw, the taste sharp and strange, but his stomach welcomed it. Relief flooded him, though unease lingered. The forest had given him something, but it had demanded effort, patience, and risk. He kept walking after, stronger now. The forest shifted again as the day stretched on. The trees grew denser, the light dimmer, the path harder. He stumbled often, his body heavy, but his determination kept him upright. By late afternoon, he found another clearing. This one was different. Stone markers stood in the grass, half buried and covered in moss, shapes carved long ago, worn by rain and time. He stared, unsure if they were natural or something else. The thought chilled him. People had been here once, maybe long ago, but where were they now? He touched one of the stones, the surface rough under his fingers. A strange silence filled the clearing, deeper than the forest's usual quiet. He stepped back quickly, a knees prickling his skin. This was not a place to stay. He left, moving faster now. The sun was lowering again, shadows stretching. Night would come soon, and he needed shelter. His legs ached, his stomach growled, but fear pushed him forward. Finally, he found a fallen tree, its massive trunk hollowed by age. Inside, there was enough space to crawl in and hide. It smelled of earth and rot, but it would do. He settled inside as the last of the light faded, pulling his backpack close once more. And as the darkness returned, the boy realized the forest was not just a place of survival. It was testing him, watching him, pushing him deeper into its endless heart. The hollow of the fallen tree offered a strange kind of comfort. Though the smell of damp rot clung heavily to the air, the boy had crawled deep into its curved shelter, curling himself tightly with his backpack pressed to his chest. The forest outside grew dim once more, the golden light fading into shadow. He had thought the cave had been suffocating, but this hollow felt like a coffin, safe, hidden, but also narrow, pressing. Still, he told himself it was better than the open ground, The night was coming again, and with it, the memories of growls, of footsteps too heavy to belong to anything harmless. His body ached from walking, from hunger, from constant fear, yet his mind refused to let him rest. His stomach twisted again, growling loudly in the silence. He pressed his hand against it, wishing the sound would quiet. The fish from earlier had kept him moving, but it hadn't been enough. He needed more. Outside, the forest began its nightly transformation. The insects returned in chorus, singing a long, endless note. The frogs answered from the stream. Somewhere far off, an owl hooted. The boy lay still, listening, his breathing shallow. At first, the rhythm of the night lulled him. His eyes grew heavy, and sleep almost came. But then another sound cut through it. A snap of a branch, sharp and sudden. He stiffened immediately. His eyes darted toward the hollow's opening, though darkness made it impossible to see. He held his breath, waiting. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. Every part of him was alert, straining to catch the smallest noise. Then it came again, the slow crunch of footsteps, deliberate, moving closer. His pulse hammered. He gripped the knife in his hand, the metal cold against his skin. The steps stopped just outside the fallen tree. For a long, unbearable moment, there was nothing. Then, a sniffing sound, low and wet, like an animal searching. His heart raced. He held still, so still it hurt, afraid even the beat of his chest would give him away. The sniffing grew louder, closer to the opening. A shadow shifted across the faint moonlight, and he knew something was there. It scraped against the bark, a deep growl rumbling in its chest. He shut his eyes, every muscle locked in terror. Then, as suddenly as it came, the sound retreated. The growl faded. The steps grew softer until finally, silence returned. He lay there trembling, his knife clutched so tightly his hand ached. Minutes passed before he dared to breathe fully. He felt weak, drained, but grateful to still be alive. The night stretched endlessly. He dozed in short, broken moments, waking at every noise. Sometimes it was only insects, sometimes distant howls, once the eerie screech of something he couldn't name. His dreams were tangled with shadows, with whispers, with the feeling of running endlessly and never escaping. When dawn finally broke, light filtering faintly into the hollow, he crawled out, his body stiff and aching. The forest looked almost kind in the morning, bright, green, alive. Birds flitted between branches, squirrels darted along trunks, and the stream sparkled with sunlight. But he knew better now. The forest could be beautiful, but its beauty carried teeth. He drank from the stream, the cool water soothing his throat. Hunger gnawed harder than ever, sharper now, demanding. His mind raced. He had to find food, real food, or his strength would fail him. The fish had been luck, but luck wasn't enough. He decided to follow the stream further, reasoning that water might lead him to places where animals gathered, or to plants he could recognize. The air was thick with morning mist as he walked, the staff in one hand, the knife in the other. His steps were slower now, heavier, but determination kept him moving. Hours passed. The forest grew denser, the path harder to walk. Roots tangled across the ground. Vines reached low from the branches. Once, he tripped and scraped his knee, blood beating against the dirt. He wiped it with water, gritting his teeth, forcing himself onward. Then he saw something new: berries. A bush covered in small, dark fruits stood near the stream, its leaves shining with dew. His heart leapt. He crouched, reaching out, but hesitation froze him. He remembered the warnings, the stories of poison. Were these safe, or a trap? He studied them closely. They looked like ones he had seen before, but memory wavered. His stomach growled, demanding, but fear of sickness held him back. He picked one anyway, rolling it in his fingers, staring at it for a long time. His lips trembled as he raised it toward his mouth, then stopped. He couldn't risk it. Not yet. With a sigh, he dropped it back. Hunger was terrible, but poison was worse. As he moved on, the forest shifted again. The trees thinned, and he found himself in a wider space. Sunlight poured freely here, warming the ground. In the middle stood something unexpected, an old structure, barely standing. A wooden frame, broken beams, half-collapsed walls covered in vines. He froze, staring. It was the first sign of human life since he entered the forest. Slowly, he approached, heart racing. The structure looked like a cabin abandoned long ago. The roof had caved in on one side, and the door hung loosely. He stepped carefully, pushing it open. Inside, dust floated in shafts of light. The air smelled of damp wood and earth. Broken furniture lay scattered: an overturned table, a rotted chair, pieces of what might once have been shelves. He walked slowly, every creak of the floor echoing loudly. In one corner, he found an old metal tin, rusted but intact. His hands shook as he opened it, hoping. Inside were scraps of cloth, a broken knife, and a small box of matches. Matches. His breath caught. Fire. For the first time, real fire. He laughed softly, relief flooding him. The boy clutched the box tightly, tears stinging his eyes. Even if the matches were old, even if only a few worked, it was hope. Fire meant warmth, protection, cooking food. Fire meant survival. He searched further, finding little else of use. The shelves held only dust and fragments, the floor nothing but dirt. Still, the matches alone were a gift. He decided to stay here, at least for the night. The cabin, though broken, had walls. It felt more like shelter than anything he had found before. As the day waned, he prepared. He gathered dry branches and leaves, piling them in the cabin's corner. He struck one match, heart pounding. At first, it fizzled, the flame small, but then the dry leaves caught, glowing, spreading into a crackling fire. The warmth filled the space, golden light chasing away shadows. He sat close, holding out his hands, the heat soaking into his skin. The fire popped and hissed, the smoke curling upward through the broken roof. For the first time since he entered the forest, he felt something close to safe. That night, he slept near the fire, its glow comforting, its warmth steady. The forest outside still moved, still whispered, still growled, but the fire gave him courage. He dreamt not of endless shadows, but of home, of familiar walls, of voices, of warmth that wasn't stolen from a fragile flame. Yet, even as he slept, the forest watched, patient, waiting. Morning light slipped gently through the broken roof of the abandoned cabin, casting long streaks across the dusty floor. The boy woke slowly, the warmth of the fire still lingering faintly on his skin. For the first time in days, he hadn't been jolted awake by fear. The crackling flame had stood guard through the night, its glow keeping the shadows at bay. His body was still sore, his stomach still hollow, but his mind felt sharper. Fire had changed everything. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Ashes smoldered faintly in the fireplace he had built from stones the night before. He added a few small branches, blowing gently until the embers glowed again. The flames rose slowly, alive once more. The boy smiled faintly. Fire meant power. The forest no longer seemed as invincible as it had before, but hunger remained. It gnawed at him, stronger now, sharper. His body demanded more than water and scraps. He needed food, real food, or his strength would break. He stepped outside. The morning air cool and damp. Mist clung low across the forest floor, curling around the roots and grass. The cabin stood lonely in the clearing, its frames sagging with age. Vines crept along its walls, swallowing the wood like the forest itself wanted to erase it. But to him, it was a fortress, a fragile one, but a fortress nonetheless. He walked to the stream, drinking deeply, splashing water on his face. His reflection wavered in the current, eyes tired, skin streaked with dirt, lips cracked. He hardly recognized himself, but there was no time for that. Survival came first. The boy decided he would try again with fish. He sharpened the end of a sturdy branch with his knife, shaping it into a crude spear. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Kneeling by the water, he watched carefully, waiting for movement. His stomach growled loudly, urging him to act. Minutes dragged. The forest was alive with songbirds calling, insects buzzing, but the stream seemed to quiet. Then, a flicker beneath the surface. His muscles tensed. The fish darted quickly, silver flashing. He thrust the spear, the water splashing wildly. At first, nothing. He tried again, patience fighting against desperation. Then, finally, the point struck true. The fish writhed against the wood, struggling, but it was caught. He pulled it out, breathless with triumph. He didn't waste time. Carrying it back to the cabin, he cleaned it with his knife, rinsing it carefully. This time, he had fire. He set it over the flames on a piece of broken metal he had found inside the cabin. Watching as the skin darkened, the smell filling the air, his stomach twisted painfully with hunger, but his heart raced with joy. When he finally bit into it, the taste was smoky, bitter in places, but it was food. Warm, real food. He ate every piece, licking his fingers when it was done. For the first time since entering the forest, he felt strong. The boy sat by the fire for a long time after, staring into the flames. His thoughts wandered about the forest, about why he had come here, about how far he had walked. He thought of home, of voices he hadn't heard in days, of the comfort he had once taken for granted. But those thoughts were heavy, dangerous. He shook them off. He couldn't afford to long for what he didn't have. He had to focus on now. As the day grew brighter, he decided to explore farther from the cabin. The matches had given him hope, but he knew the box was small, the sticks few. He needed more food, more tools, more safety. The forest would not stop testing him. He moved carefully, marking his path with scratches on trees so he could find his way back. The forest was thicker here, older. The trees stood closer, their branches knitting together to block out the sky. The ground was soft with layers of fallen leaves, and strange fungi clung to rotting logs. He avoided them, wary of their colors and shapes. Deeper into the woods, he found tracks, animal prints pressed into the dirt. He crouched, studying them. They were larger than his hand, the claws sharp, the shape unfamiliar. His chest tightened. He remembered the growl from the night, the shadow outside the hollow. The thought made him shiver, but curiosity pulled him forward. He followed the prints for a while, each step careful, until he reached a clearing. The ground here was torn, the soil scattered, as if something had fought. Feathers lay strewn about, broken and bloodied. His stomach turned. Something had been hunted here. He knelt, touching one of the feathers, still damp. Whatever had done this was close, too close. A sudden sound snapped the silence, a low rustle, a heavy breath. He spun, knife raised. At the edge of the clearing, something shifted between the trees. He couldn't see it clearly, only the outline, a massive shape, crouched low, eyes faintly glinting in the dim light. His throat tightened. He backed slowly, step by step, until the shape melted into the shadows. He didn't run. Not yet. His body screamed for it, but instinct told him running would draw it closer. Only when he was sure the clearing was behind him did he turn and walk faster, then faster still, until his walk became a near run. His chest burned, his breath ragged. But he didn't stop until the cabin was in sight again. Inside, he dropped against the wall, gasping. His hands shook, the knife trembling in his grip. The forest was more dangerous than he had allowed himself to believe. Fire, food, water, they were only part of survival. There were predators here, and they were watching. That night, he built his fire higher, stacking branches until the flames roared. The glow painted the cabin walls in gold, the shadows dancing wildly. He sat close, the warmth soaking into his skin, his eyes fixed on the door. Every creak of wood, every whisper of wind made him tighten his grip on the knife. The forest outside seemed restless, louder than before. Crickets chirped, owls cried, and once, far away, the same howl echoed the one he had heard nights before. It raised the hairs on his neck. He fed more wood into the fire, watching sparks leap toward the broken roof. When sleep finally came, it was shallow, filled with uneasy dreams. He dreamt of being hunted, of running through endless trees, of eyes glowing in the dark. He woke often, staring at the embers, forcing himself to stay awake. The dawn brought little comfort this time. He was alive, yes, but the forest was changing. It no longer felt like a test of endurance. It felt like a game of survival, and he wasn't sure who was playing against him. Still, as the sun rose and the fire burned low, the boy stood. He was weaker than the forest, smaller than its predators, but he was still alive, and as long as he was alive, he would fight. The morning mist clung to the forest like a living thing, curling around tree trunks and rolling over fallen logs in slow, ghostly waves. The boy emerged from the cabin, blinking against the pale light, the embers of last night's fire still glowing faintly in the hearth. He felt the ache in his muscles from yesterday's exertion, the dull throb in his stomach from hunger, but also a flicker of determination. Each day he survived. Each night he outlasted the forest's tests. He felt a little stronger, a little wiser. He had learned the value of patience. He had learned the importance of fire, water, and careful observation. And he had learned, painfully, that the forest never forgave mistakes. Every misstep, Every careless choice had consequences, sometimes small, sometimes terrifyingly large. As he moved into the woods, he followed the stream again, watching its ripples, listening to its murmurs. He had begun to recognize the signs of animals. A broken branch here, a footprint there, a faint rustle of leaves. His eyes were sharper now, scanning constantly, his ears tuned to the faintest sounds. The forest had begun to teach him its own language. By mid-morning, he stumbled upon a fallen tree bridging the stream, moss-covered and slick. It threatened to tip with the slightest misstep. Carefully, he balanced himself on it, moving slowly, testing each step before committing his weight. His heart thumped as the stream roared beneath him, a living barrier that reminded him of how fragile his survival was. Once across, he found signs of life. Berries growing along the underbrush, a small cluster of edible mushrooms near the roots of a rotting oak. His hands trembled with relief and caution. He gathered what he could, remembering the lessons he had learned about eating only what he could identify. Hunger gnawed at him, but knowledge tempered desperation. The deeper he ventured, the forest grew wilder. Trees towered, their roots knotted like serpents over the ground. Vines twisted around trunks and hung from branches like traps. Birds of unfamiliar colors darted between the canopy, their call strange and sharp. The air grew heavier, thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. He felt a thrill mixed with apprehension. He was farther from the cabin than ever before, and the forest's secrets seemed closer. A sudden movement caught his eye, a flash of fur, quick and light, darting between the trees. He froze, the knife in his hand suddenly feeling both reassuring and insufficient. Whatever it was, it watched him as much as he watched it. He crouched low, barely breathing, heart hammering. The animal paused, then disappeared into the underbrush. Relief and fear mingled, a constant companion in these woods. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, spilling pale light through the canopy. Sweat ran down his back, his legs ached, but he pressed on. At one point, he found another stream, smaller than the one he had been following. The water was clear, cold, and he drank deeply, letting the chill wash away some of his fatigue. He noticed something unusual along this smaller stream, rocks arranged unnaturally, in what appeared to be a line, almost like markers. He crouched, examining them. Was it animal or human? He couldn't be certain. The thought sent shivers down his spine. If humans had been here, where were they now? And why had they left only stones, silent and cold? In the midst of such wildness, the day wore on, the forest shifting with the sun. Shadows lengthened, darkening the forest floor, and he realized he needed to find shelter before nightfall. He was far from the cabin, and the thought of another night alone, with predators and unknown dangers, tightened his chest. Scanning the area, he spotted a dense thicket near a rise in the land. The undergrowth was thick, but the base of an old tree had a small hollow just large enough to crawl into. He approached cautiously, testing the entrance with his foot. It seemed stable. Crawling inside, he pressed himself low against the walls, feeling the damp earth against his back. From this vantage, he could hear the forest alive around him, the chirping of crickets, the occasional call of a bird, and, faintly, a low growl echoing in the distance. He tensed, gripping his knife. He had no fire here, no protection beyond the small hollow and his own instincts. He sat for hours, listening. The forest had begun to feel almost sentient. Every sound, every movement seemed deliberate. He realized that the danger wasn't just animals, it was the forest itself, alive with patterns he could not yet fully understand. By dusk, he rationed his remaining food, nibbling on berries and mushrooms he had collected. Hunger still gnawed at him, but the small meal gave him energy and hope. He stared into the dimming light outside the hollow, considering his next move. Night fell. The forest transformed, shadows stretching long, and sounds became amplified in the darkness. He pressed himself further into the hollow, wrapping his arms around his knees. He thought of the fire back at the cabin, the warmth and protection it had provided. Here, he had none of that, only the knife, the hollow, and his resolve. The night was long. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent his heart racing. Once, he heard the low growl again, closer this time. He froze, barely breathing, every muscle tense. The sound moved past the hollow, fading slowly into the distance. Relief washed over him, but he knew it was only temporary. Sleep was shallow, punctuated by dreams of endless trees, glowing eyes, and shadows that stretched impossibly long. He woke repeatedly, staring into the darkness, forcing himself to stay alert. The forest was not forgiving, and it had taught him that much. When dawn came again, he emerged from the hollow, his body stiff and aching. Mist hung low, and the sun cast pale light through the trees. He felt the hunger again, stronger than ever. But he also felt something else, determination. The boy had survived nights alone, hunted and tested by the forest. He had learned the language of water, the signs of animals, the lessons of patience and caution. But he knew the forest still held far more secrets, and he was ready to face them. He set off, following the stream once more, the forest stretching endlessly before him. Each step was careful, deliberate, but his heart carried hope, a fragile, flickering hope that no night, no predator, no shadow could extinguish. And as he walked, the boy realized that the forest was teaching him not just survival, but something deeper: endurance, awareness, and a connection to the wild that few humans ever experienced. He was alone, yes, but he was learning to belong in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The sun climbed higher, and the boy pressed on, ready for whatever the forest would throw at him next. The boy moved through the forest with a new rhythm now. His steps were deliberate, careful, yet confident. The lessons of previous nights had carved themselves into his instincts. The way to listen to the faintest rustle of leaves, the way to see the smallest disturbances in the underbrush, the way to sense the presence of life even when he could not see it. Every moment was a balance between survival and curiosity, between fear and wonder. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of damp earth and decomposing leaves. The forest seemed to stretch endlessly, trees towering overhead like ancient guardians. Light filtered through the canopy in irregular patches, creating patterns on the forest floor that shifted as the sun climbed higher. He traced the path of these light beams with his eyes, noticing subtle movements in the underbrush, small creatures scurrying, insects crawling, a snake flicking its tongue cautiously from the safety of a low branch. He followed the stream, the water now becoming a trusted guide. Its rhythm was steady, predictable. Unlike the forest that often shifted from serene beauty to a realm of hidden danger in an instant, the boy learned to watch for changes in the water as well as an abrupt widening of the stream, a sudden pull, ripples caused not by the wind, but by fish or other unseen creatures. Each observation added to his growing understanding of the wilderness around him. By mid-morning, he reached a slope where the trees thinned slightly, revealing a rocky outcrop overlooking the stream below. He climbed carefully, using a broken branch as a staff for balance, and reached the top, where he paused to survey the terrain. The forest stretched in all directions, vast and unbroken, with no signs of human civilization. From this vantage, he felt a strange mixture of awe and insignificance. The world was immense, and he was but a single, small life navigating its endless mysteries. He settled against a boulder for a moment, pulling his backpack closer and taking a drink of water. The fire in the cabin had given him warmth and safety, but it was gone now, leaving him once more at the mercy of the forest. Hunger pressed at him, but he had learned to ration, to observe, and to plan. He reached into his pack and pulled out a few remaining berries, eating them slowly and carefully. Each bite was a reminder of the delicate balance between life and death in the wilderness. The stream's sound grew louder below him, and he realized he had reached a small waterfall. The water cascaded over rocks, frothing and splashing into a shallow pool. The scene was breathtaking. Mist rose, catching the light in faint rainbows. He watched for a long moment, captivated, before noticing tracks in the mud near the water's edge. Small animal prints led in several directions, but one set of footprints was larger, deeper, and unmistakably from a predator. His pulse quickened. The forest was not just a backdrop of beauty. It was alive with motion, with life constantly seeking sustenance, and he was part of that cycle. He crouched low, studying the tracks, trying to determine what creature had passed this way. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He knew he must proceed carefully. Hours passed as he followed the stream beyond the waterfall. The terrain grew rougher, rock slick with moss and roots twisting like serpents across the ground. The forest seemed to tighten around him, shadows stretching longer, and the sounds of wildlife became more pronounced. Birds calling sharply, insects buzzing with urgency, and distant growls that reminded him of nights past. He moved cautiously, every step measured, every sense alert. By afternoon, he stumbled upon a series of caves hidden in the rocky hillside. The openings were dark and foreboding, partially obscured by vines and debris. Curiosity warred with caution. He approached the nearest entrance slowly, testing the ground with his staff. The cave was cool inside, damp with condensation, and smelled of earth and something older, something ancient and untouched. He stepped inside, moving slowly, the darkness enveloping him. The walls were jagged, lined with mineral deposits that glittered faintly in his flashlight's beam. The air was heavy, each breath pulling moisture into his lungs. The boy pressed forward, feeling the history of the place seep into him. This was a part of the forest he had never encountered before, a hidden world beneath the canopy where light rarely reached. Deeper inside, the cave opened into a large chamber. Stalactites hung from the ceiling, dripping water onto the stone floor. Pools of clear water reflected the faint light from his flashlight. creating the illusion of stars within the cave. He knelt beside one pool, drinking carefully, the cool water soothing his parched throat. Then he heard a low, almost imperceptible sound, the echo of something moving deep in the chamber. His heart tightened, and he gripped his knife, stepping back slowly. The sound grew louder, deliberate, rhythmic. He froze, listening, realizing he was not alone. Shadows shifted in the darkness, and the air seemed to pulse with life. His instinct screamed at him to leave, yet curiosity held him rooted in place. The forest had taught him to be cautious, but it had also taught him to observe, to understand. He edged forward, flashlight in hand, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. A figure emerged from the darkness, small but unmistakable. A fox, its fur gleaming in the faint light, stood at the edge of a pool, watching him intently. Its eyes reflected intelligence, awareness, a connection to this hidden world he had never known. The boy held his breath, frozen in awe and respect. The fox did not flee. Instead, it stepped carefully into the shallow water, moving gracefully, almost deliberately. Before vanishing into another shadowed passage, the boy exhaled, heart pounding, a mix of relief and wonder coursing through him. He realized then that the forest had moments of beauty interwoven with danger, moments of revelation that reminded him of his place within it. As the sun began to lower in the sky, the boy retraced his steps out of the cave, careful to mark his path. Outside, the forest was bathed in golden light, the canopy glowing with warmth. He followed the stream a little further, before finding a suitable spot to rest for the night. A flat area on a gentle rise, sheltered by trees and boulders. He built a small fire, the flames crackling and warming him. He ate some berries and small mushrooms, drinking from his water supply. Exhaustion pressed down, but he felt a sense of accomplishment. He had explored deeper than before, had witnessed something extraordinary, and had returned safely. The night fell, bringing with it familiar fears, the sounds of predators, the whispers of wind through the trees, the occasional distant howl. All reminded him that the forest was a living, breathing entity, vast and unpredictable. He tightened his grip on his knife, listening carefully, but this time he felt a new resilience. He had faced danger, hunger, and isolation before. He had survived. As he settled by the fire, staring into the flames, he thought about the days ahead. The forest was endless, each step a challenge, each night a test. Yet, he also felt a deepening connection to it, a growing understanding of its rhythms, its lessons, its quiet power. He was no longer merely surviving. He was learning, adapting, becoming part of its cycle in a way he had never imagined. The boy drifted into a weary sleep, the fire beside him flickering and casting dancing shadows. Outside, the forest watched, alive, patient, eternal, and he, small but unbroken, slept within its vast embrace, ready for the trials and wonders of the days to come. The first light of dawn seeped slowly into the forest, brushing the treetops with soft gold. The boy stirred, muscles stiff and sore from the uneven ground where he had slept. His eyes opened to the filtered sun, the forest alive with the subtle hum of morning, birds calling to each other, insects stirring in the underbrush, and the soft, steady rush of the stream nearby. He stretched carefully, mindful of every ache, and rose to his feet. Each day was a new challenge, but each day also brought lessons he hadn't known he needed. He packed up his meager supplies, berries collected, water bottle filled, knife sheathed and ready, and moved cautiously through the forest, following the stream once more. Over time, he had learned the small tricks of the wilderness. How to spot safe places to drink, where animals were likely to leave edible plants. How to read the subtle signs of predators moving nearby. Survival wasn't just about endurance. It was about awareness, patience, and respect. As the morning progressed, the forest grew denser. The canopy thickened overhead, the air cooler and damper. Shadows lengthening across moss-covered rocks and fallen branches. He noticed subtle changes in the underbrush, broken twigs, displaced leaves, small tracks in soft soil, and followed them cautiously. Some led to small pools of water where birds had bathed, others to patches of berries or mushrooms. Hours passed. Hunger pressed against him, sharper now, a constant gnawing reminder that he had survived the night, but still needed sustenance. The boy examined each plant carefully, recalling what he had learned: color, texture, placement, and signs that indicated whether something was safe to eat. He nibbled cautiously, testing each berry or leaf, chewing slowly to avoid mistakes. By midday, he reached a natural clearing where the sunlight spilled freely across a meadow of ferns and wildflowers. He paused, letting himself breathe in the light, the scents, the warmth. The forest here felt less oppressive, almost serene, and he took advantage of the calm to drink from his water bottle and eat. His movements were deliberate, each bite and sip a measured act of survival. Yet, he allowed himself to appreciate the beauty around him. The stream continued onward, curving gently through the clearing and disappearing into dense woods beyond. He followed it, now alert to the subtle cues of the forest. A sudden rustle in the underbrush caught his attention. He froze, heart pounding, scanning the shadows. A small deer emerged, cautious but curious, pausing to drink at the stream before bounding gracefully into the trees. Relief and fascination mingled in him. This was proof that the forest was alive in a balanced way, a cycle of predator and prey, life and death, that he had become a part of, though only as an observer for now. As afternoon approached, the terrain changed. The gentle slopes gave way to jagged rocks and fallen tree trunks, making the path more treacherous. The boy moved carefully, using his staff and knife to steady himself and clear minor obstacles. Each step required focus. One misstep could result in injury, which could compromise his survival. Suddenly, he noticed a faint smoke trail rising from behind a dense thicket. His pulse quickened. Fire! Someone else was in the forest or had been recently. Cautiously, he approached, ducking behind trees and rocks. The smoke curled lazily upward, but there was no immediate sign of movement. He listened intently, holding his breath. Only the faint crackle of the fire remained. No human voices, no footsteps. He approached slowly, and then saw it. A small campsite, abandoned, but clearly set up by someone. A circle of stones surrounded a shallow pit, ash and partially burnt wood still present. Nearby, a few empty tins and scraps of food had been left behind. The boy examined the site carefully. Whoever had been here had likely left recently, but the fire and signs of occupation suggested that humans had survived here, if only briefly. He felt a mix of emotions: curiosity, hope, and a cautionary fear. Humans in the forest meant possible help, knowledge, or even danger. He decided not to linger too long. Instead, he took mental notes, memorizing the site and its surroundings before continuing along the stream. The forest had taught him to move carefully and observe everything. Here, that lesson was crucial. By late afternoon, the stream widened slightly, forming a series of small pools with clear, still water. Fish swam lazily in the deeper sections. He knelt at the edge, spearing one with practiced precision. The thrill of success mixed with relief as he prepared it over a small fire he built from fallen branches. The meal was simple, but it strengthened him, giving him the energy needed for the next stage of his journey. The boy continued onward, moving into thicker forest as shadows lengthened. The air grew cooler, the scent of damp earth and moss more pronounced. Each sound, from the faint crackle of twigs underfoot to the distant call of wildlife, reminded him of the delicate balance in which he existed. He had learned that the forest demanded respect. It tested those who entered, rewarding caution and punishing carelessness. Night approached, bringing with it the familiar tension of darkness. He searched for shelter, eventually finding a natural hollow in the base of a large tree, partially concealed by thick vines and roots. Crawling inside, he pressed against the walls, feeling the safety of enclosed space, yet aware that danger could still lurk nearby. Hunger, fatigue, and fear mingled, but experience had made him resilient. He tended a small fire at the entrance, just enough to provide warmth and deter any curious predators without attracting undue attention. Hours passed. The forest came alive at night. The calls of nocturnal animals, the rustling of unseen creatures, the occasional low growl in the distance. The boy stayed vigilant, his knife within reach, senses alert. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by the sounds and shadows of the forest. But gradually his exhaustion outweighed his fear. In the quiet moments, he reflected on his journey so far. Each day had been a trial, each night a test. He had faced hunger, exhaustion, fear, and isolation. Yet, he had survived. More than that, he had begun to understand the rhythms of the forest, the patterns of life and death, and the subtle cues that could mean the difference between safety and peril. As dawn broke again, light spilling through the thick canopy, he emerged from the hollow, muscles aching, stomach empty but spirit determined. The forest awaited, vast and mysterious, and he was ready to face it once more. Every step forward was a challenge, every breath a victory, and every choice carried weight. The boy moved onward, following the stream deeper into the wilderness, aware that the forest's tests would continue, but confident that he had grown stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the world around him.